Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I wanna start with a story. Last year I was at a conference in St. Petersburg, also a very great city, and I memorized this one sentence in Russian, and it says something like "Welcome and thank you for coming to my talk." And I said this sentence, and everybody was looking like me, like I'm an alien. So I have deep respect for Jeffrey this morning, who said welcome to you in Russian, but I'm not going to do that again. It was not a nice experience. Welcome to this talk. I'm not going to introduce myself. I think my talk is more interesting than I am. I'm going to talk about changing world, and the agenda for this last talk of the day is we're going to talk about gold digging, about yoga at work, about Gollum from the Lord of the Rings, and about the funeral of Word, and of course we are talking about flying goldfish. I'm always talking about flying goldfish. Is this what you expect me to talk about? Yeah? Yeah, oh, that's a big relief, you know, otherwise I would have taken the wrong talk with me, but seriously, our world is changing, and our world is changing dramatically. Suppose you would have asked me, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, could you make a word cloud of the things that are really important for testing in this period of time? Probably I would have made a word cloud something like this, with words like documentation, specification. Of course, the handbook. If you're out of control, just go to the handbook. We made a test plan. We had fixed requirements. The process was really in the center of everything, and process adherence was really important. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a time frame, and in this time frame, something really nice happened. Some people stood up and they started to design a test process. They started to think about testing and how can we do testing, and they came up with test phases, and they came up with test design techniques, still very usable. And it was very good in that time frame. But something happened. And probably you've already seen this. It's the Agile Software Development Manifesto. And I'm not going very deep into the Agile Software Testing Manifesto, the Agile Development Manifesto. I'm not going very deep into DevOps as well, but let's be honest, it really changed our world. Not for all organizations. My current project is really wonderful. It feels a bit like 1990. But my previous project was really DevOps. And in those two different projects, I test in a different way, of course, because the context is different. If you would ask me today to make that same word cloud, I would probably make something like this. And with completely other words, flexibility, things like business value, so everything is value-based, craftsmanship, very, very important. Passion, of course, Agile, Scrum, vision, customer satisfaction. Completely different things are important today compared to, let's say, 20, 15 years ago. I would like to go one step deeper on this and see what the effects are on testing. I think 10, 15 years ago, a planned test process was very important. I don't know what your maximum is, but my test plan, number of pages in a test plan, my maximum is 68. Sorry to admit, I see some people nodding. Is there someone in the room who made a thicker task plan than 68 pages? Or don't you admit it? I guess the last thing. I think by now, flexibility is much more important. You know, Agile is all about flexibility. So we should more be able to react on what's happening. And a plan will limit us in our reaction to what's happening. So plan was very important. Flexibility is very important right now. I think 10, 15 years ago, following a method was really, really important. In the Netherlands we have this very well-known method, and today even 2 people told me they know this method. And I think it was a very good method in that period of time. By now, craftsmanship is much more important. Being able to adapt to this situation, recognize what's happening, and then changing the way you're testing is something that's inside of people. So craftsmanship is much more important. There used to be a very intense process focus. People were very focused on following the process step by step, preparation, then execution, not first execution, that's not possible. By now, most managers say, yeah, it's nice if you follow the process, who cares? Did you reach the goal? Did we deliver what the business was asking? Did we deliver value? So we're much more goal-oriented, and of course you can divide from the process nowadays. And okay, there's still organizations that want everything tested very thoroughly, really test everything that's possible to test. But a lot of organizations think they should deliver fast to the market, as fast as possible. So don't wait too long with your to go into production, but go fast, get early feedback, and then change again. Test everything. Maybe there's something in there you will delete afterwards. So why test everything? And I think there used to be very strong tension towards standards. Follow standards. Show them you use this ISO standard something. I will go deeper into that later. By now they're saying, hey, it's not very important to follow the standard, it's more important to be pragmatic in testing. So again, this flexibility. So this all has an effect on testing. And then some people, they asked around, okay, so the old-fashioned, the old classic ways of testing don't count anymore, they're not applicable, not always applicable now. So tell me how to do modern testing. And to be honest, I don't think there is one answer to this question. There's not one new method, and the people who are saying there is don't believe in it. Because every situation is different, every project is different. Like I said, my current project is really old-fashioned. The project before, we built an app in a DevOps team, and we were building it for 100,000 users a day. We're reaching 100,000 users a day by now. Technologically seen, completely different. My current project, we're building actually software for 5-6 users, very important software, but 5-6 users, and the other one, 100,000 users a day. So I may hope that they test in a different way, but still there are some characteristics you can see in modern testing that count for almost all situations. And well, we bought some pizzas, we bought some beer, we sat together and we came with 56 different characteristics. That doesn't work. So we brought it back to 3 main characteristics, in our opinion. Sorry. The 3 main characteristics are goal-oriented, flexible, and fast. First characteristic, goal-oriented. A couple of months ago, I was with a colleague of mine, and I asked him, "Why are you testing?" And he said, "Well, because I have to." "No, but why is tested needed in your project?" "Well, we have to make sure that the software is good." "Yeah, but why do they need it? What's your added value?" And he couldn't tell me. So he was spending money, basically, and he was doing things. But why? What was the reason? Why was he added to this project? He didn't know. I think that's a really bad situation. I think you should always be aware what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and you can explain it. And I'm not going to give you 5 or 6 books you should read, but I think you should read this book. Start with why. Everything has got a reason. It's by Simon Sinek. I think it's a brilliant book. Brilliant author, by the way. And you should be able, in my opinion, to tell me why you're testing, what your added value for testing is. So this is the essence of what Simon Sinek says. In the core of everything is the why, and if you understand that, the how and the what will be easier to elaborate. On a very high level, if we go deeper into this goal-oriented, I think there are on a very high level 3 reasons why we test. And the first reason is more confirmation-based. There are situations, especially in governmental organizations, and before they go into production, they need to know they meet certain requirements. Requirements by law or required by regulations or whatever. And you don't go into production if you meet these requirements. Then you have to be sure that you meet the requirements. So here's the requirement, you make a test case and you execute it. And you stop essentially thinking. This can happen. In some situations, software house is building software for a client and they need to meet certain technical requirements. Make sure that the software meets them. So checking, you can automate it, of course, but maybe it's more efficient to do it by hand in some situations. But checking if it meets the requirements could be a good reason. That doesn't mean it's always a good reason. Testing could lower risk. If you go into production, you want to know the risks up front. You want to know what will probably go wrong, what will not go wrong. So risk-based testing could also be a good reason. And I think we should more often look at value-based testing. This one organization making this app for 100,000 users a day was spending more than €1 million on it. What value do they expect? Why do they spend €1 million on it? So is the value delivered by this system? And I used to be on a project quite a long time. And when I was asking myself this question, and I asked it to the CEO, he told me, well, basically to get rid of 20% of our employees. And by just that sentence, I understood all the political problems, all the political movements, all the things that were going around in the organization. But I also knew what I should should look at when I was testing the system. Can we actually save money by implementing this system? And maybe the system was doing what it was supposed to do according to the requirements. Who cares? Maybe there were not very much risks for the process and the process would continue, but can we save money by doing less things by hand? That was the actual question. And that has a very much effect on testing and how you test. So know the goal up front, and maybe these 3 different approaches to test, the 3 different reasons for testing can help you to define if you're on the right track. So maybe, as testers, we're kind of gold diggers. Is there gold in this new application? Is there gold in this new branch, this new version of the software? They spend money on it. What do they expect from it? So maybe we're gold diggers. How cool is that? Yeah, cool. Characteristic number 2. When I started in testing, I was taught this one test method, and basically they said to me, "Well, this test method is very good. I'm going to take a picture for my daughter." That's a long story, but at school she had a presentation for 20 classmates, and she was so nervous. And then I said to her, "Well, what about 250 Russians?" Anyway, flexibility. Just follow the method and all your problems will be solved. I don't believe that anymore. If you go to different conferences, if you read different books, you will surely see that there are different ways you can test a system. And I think that professional software testers should master these different ways and be able to decide when to implement which way of testing. And if we look at a very high level to testing and schools of testing or different ways of testing, we see two main streams in testing. The more classical ISTQB based ways of testing, more scripted testing, so much preparation, much planning, not very flexible, and exploratory testing with not very much preparation, but being more reactive to the situation. Personally, I think they're both right and they're both wrong. There are still situations, like this governmental organization, where scripted testing could be the best way to test your system. There are also situations in which exploratory testing would be better. So personally, with me some colleagues of mine, we think that there's not a choice between scripted and exploratory testing, but there are intermediate forms of testing. And we came up with this drawing with 6 different ways of testing. That doesn't mean there are only 6 different ways, but we encountered that with these 6 you could probably test most situations. And we use all these 6 and yeah, they work. It goes from detailed scripting, so a lot of time spending on making your scripts upfront, based on requirements, based on documentation. Suppose your users are testing, then maybe it's good not to make very detailed scripts because they know the processes, they know the previous system, the previous version. So maybe global scripts can be enough in this situation. Going to the other end, freestyle exploratory testing is something you need to know a little bit about the system you're testing, and you need to have one test idea or test case or something you want to test, and you just start testing. And the application will tell you what it's doing, how it's doing it, why it's doing it, and you get information and you use that information to do the best possible test after this test. And this way you explore through the system, and at the end you can tell what the system is doing, which parts are working, which are not working. This has very much freedom, maybe too much. And a lot of testers want to have some kind of grip, to have some kind of idea, to focus. Maybe you should focus on testing if the processes are, you could do the processes. Maybe you want to test all the calculations. Maybe you want to see if the screens are right. Maybe you want to test the bad parts of the system. That's Test Tours, brilliant book by James Whittaker, helping testers to get more focus in their testing. Bug hunts or test mobs, which are variation of bug hunts in my opinion, are more group-wise testing for, let's say, acceptance testing, where users or developers and users together, or other people, maybe even the CEO, I did that at this one organization, are testing in groups, and everybody has got a different part of the system, different goals, etc., etc. And then we have session-based testing, put it somewhere in the middle. You do some preparation, you make charters up front. There's still freedom, so some exploratory testing within your session, and you can divide all the test work you have to do in different parts in different sessions, so you have more accountability up front and afterwards. In my personal opinion, a real professional tester knows all these ways of testing and is also capable to decide which way of testing is the best way of testing in his or her situation. So that's pretty difficult. Suppose, don't raise your hand, but suppose you're here and you say, bug hunts, never heard of. It could be that in your project, bug hunts is the best way to test your system. It is a possibility, but you didn't know it. You only read about freestyle exploratory testing, you got your ISTQB certificate, whatever it's worth, but you got it. That's all you know. But maybe somewhere here is something that's more valuable for your project. So if you see a term on this screen where you think, maybe I should learn that, then you've got something to learn. And we should be the ones who adapt to the situation. We should be the ones who study the context and think, this is the best way to test. So yeah, my previous project is this app built by these Java developers in sneakers. And now I have this more boring assignment where I have to do detailed scripting to make sure that this report which is going out every month to the central bank is right. I adapt to the situation, so you need to be very flexible and very changing to the situation. So it's a kind of yoga at work. No, I can't do this, but I can do those 6 different ways of testing. Characteristic number 3 for me is fast. It needs to be fast. You need to be able to go fast into production and to do your test execution fast. And for me there are 3 things that help you to make it faster. Test automation, documentation, or limiting documentation. And I'm pretty convinced, and there's also scientific evidence, that more exploratory ways of testing is faster than the old classical way of testing, the scripted testing. Test automation is a very difficult thing. Everybody who is doing test automation right now? Well, I expected more. It's about 50-50 or something like that. How I see the testing world right now, everybody is saying, automate everything, and we should do more automation, and automation is the solution. If someone says blah 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 is the solution, I tend to doubt about it. But let's be honest, automation is checking. And I wanna, it was translated actually. I was at the presentation in this room before here, and it was in Russian, so I had a translation. I hope I understood it right, what they said during the presentation. But this lady, which was standing here actually, she said something like, maybe we should do, it's a good practice to first do the test case manually, so that you know for sure that the test case is working, and then automate it. But then you already have tested the system with this test case. So test automation, 95% of the times, is pure checking something you already know. It's for regression testing, which is fine, which is great, but I never hear the question, how many defects do originate in regression? Do we have a reason for regression? Maybe we're too focused on test automation, but test automation is limited. We do check what we actually already know and hope it's still the same. And can we automate everything? That's a good question as well. Well, the amount of test cases possible you can do on a system is infinite. Some people say, no, at one moment you've tested everything. Yeah, but the number of test cases you can do is infinite. You can always come up with new test cases. They don't add any value, but the number of test cases is infinite. So automate everything is nonsense, but okay. Only a part of them is valuable, and by the time you've tested a certain functional path, you've covered it. Okay, that's great. There are some test cases you only want to do once, because some parts of the software, this one app has some pages on it for legal reasons. Probably these pages will never change. There are no links to it other than the one link to come there. The text is static. We're not going to automate that one. It's probably never going to change. So we test it only once. You will not automate those tests, don't we? Then there are some test cases that are pretty impossible to automate. They're so complex with things coming in and out of the system. Maybe doing them by hand maybe even in regression, could be the best thing. Some you don't want to automate because the automation itself is very complex. Some people say that tools can do everything. I think words like everything are not true. And then some organizations have not automated everything. I'm not saying that only 1/3 of the valuable tests should be automated. For some organizations this is probably 80–90%. Some organizations are 10% or something like that. So it doesn't say anything about how much organizations have automated, but you will never automate everything. There's still room, depends on the situation, how much room for automation. And yes, for this app, like I told you, we have 300 something automated tests, and they're running every build. And we're integrating every day. We're deploying now once a week. So we have automated very much. But every change we make is tested by someone with eyes and a brain, because tools don't see everything. So there's still room for manual testing, but of course we will do a lot of automation. There's not a problem with test automation, that has got to do with money and management. And let's look at the costs of manual testing versus test automation. Suppose you're going to test manually, that takes a lot of money. How high this block is the amount of money, and doing test cases by hand takes a lot of time. Yeah, true, absolutely. And of course, you will need to analyze the outcome. So we spend already a lot of money. Then we do regression testing, and in all manual, we will do it by hand. Not efficient, not effective, but hey, we're talking about costs here. We still have to analyze the outcome. Oh yeah, and by the way, the system is changing. The idea of system development is that we change systems, so we still have to test by hand, manually, this system. And non-functional testing, doing manually is pretty hard. Try to do a performance test manually. It's theoretically possible. Let's look at automation. The first test to automate is really expensive. You need to do a proof of concept of different tools, or do you grab the first tool that comes around? No, so it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to decide which tool we have. Then we have to build our framework, and then we got a test. Wow, cool. Spend a lot of time, spend a lot of money, but we got our test. Adding more test cases is great for organizations where there are managers who are counting test cases. Test automation is great. I think you have to teach the manager that counting test cases is nonsense. Maybe with 10 test cases I can test much more than with 1,000 automated test cases. But adding test cases is pretty cheap. We still have to analyze the outcome. Maybe you've also had this experience where you, at 5 o'clock you start the automated test, you go home, you come back the next morning and you find out that 5 minutes past 5 it stopped because there was some test case blocking the damn thing, so you can't test while you're sleeping. Okay, but anyway, you have to make sure the outcome is correct. And of course, regression testing, if nothing changes, it's very cheap, it's very fast. Absolutely, that's great. Hey, but we still have to check the outcome. But of course, the system is changing. So we still have to do a lot of work to make it up to date. And then we have all these great possibilities to do automated performance testing, security testing, load testing, all these non-functionals we can test now because we have the tools. Wow, that's cool, but at the end of the day, those two columns are the same size. But I got good news. So I went to this manager who was talking with me about test automation. Oh, we're going to automate the tests. Wow, and I came back and I said, I got good news. I can test more. I can test more often. I can test much faster. Only the regression test, how to explain that? I can test different things. How cool is that? And I expected this manager to look like this. Wow, young Jaap, how great this is. And then I told him, by the way, it's not cheaper. What did you say? It's not cheaper. And he was looking like this. Is it all about money? Yeah. For some managers, it's all about money. And when I encountered this, I was thinking, maybe I should explain better what the added value of testing is. Maybe that's the real problem. They don't want to spend as less money as possible because they don't see the added value. And test automation is a means to an end. We want to know something, we want to have some information before we go into production. Information, did we meet the requirements? Do we cover the risks? Do we know the risks? Is the value we expect good? And then decide which is the best way, fastest way, cheapest way to get this information. And then use automation. So we should not talk about automation, we should talk about the goals of testing. Let's look at documentation. Who loves to make documentation? Nobody? Oh, there's one guy who loves to make documentation. We found him! Thank you. I don't like to make documentation, so this assignment where I made this master test plan of 68 pages was not my favorite assignment. The assignment where I could test it, that's cool. If you don't like documentation, I got one advice for you. Don't use the ISO standard 29119. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe you have not heard of it. If you haven't heard of it, forget about it. But it's an ISO standard, and basically it forces you to make very much documentation. And it's not about testing actually, it's more about the control over testing. I've been test manager for 1.5 years of the Dutch standardization organization. And their policy is, if there is a ISO standard for the work we're doing, we follow it. Okay, there was this big discussion going on in the test community and I was forced to use it. And I thought, well, let's give it a try, let's be open to everything. And then I made this test plan. This was not the 68 pages test plan, but it was pretty thick. And then I explained to them, I have to make all these Word documents, all these work products. I have to do all these different activities. And then the CIO, who knew something about testing, who was a tester before, he said, yeah, but that's not needed. I said, yeah, but you want me to use ISO 29119, and it's not that they suggest things and you can use it or not. No, you use it or you don't use it. And because we had to follow the ISO standard, testing was becoming much more costly. It costed much more money. So, in my opinion, if you don't like documentation, don't use this standard. This is Dutch Standardization Organization, and this is the test plan I made in second gear, the second approach, and it was in PowerPoint. Why did I make a plan in PowerPoint? Because I started thinking, why do we make a test plan? Not to document it, and we document it and we put it on a file server somewhere catching dust. Okay, that's impossible. But anyway, I think we make a test plan to have some discussions, to make some decisions, and to communicate them. Is communication by word good communication? No, of course not. Talking with each other, interacting with each other, discussing, that's much better communication. So I made a PowerPoint. I took my laptop, probably my previous laptop, and I just walked around the organization. Everybody who was important for this test project, I showed the presentation, we discussed about it, we changed it, etc. The CIO, after 15 minutes, he said, okay, I know enough. And those users that we're going to test, We spent more than a day explaining the test plan. I taught them some test design techniques, etc., etc. So everybody knew what we were going to do, how we were going to do it, and why we did it. I think using PowerPoint is much better than using Word. Yeah, but of course we use Word for our test scripts. Well, we did a lot of exploratory testing, and we did a lot of session-based testing. And during those sessions, we used mind maps very much. Yesterday we had this tutorial, and we used mind maps all the time. I see some people from the from the tutorial yesterday. So at the end, almost all the testers were using mind maps to control their testing. So at the end of the day, we didn't use Word. And I would say, my advice, de-install Word. We don't need it. You hate it. Everybody who wants to read hates it. Interact with each other, use other tools. It's much better. So we can save time and money on documentation and spend that time on actual testing. And that's what we're getting paid for, actual testing. So we can become faster by means of test automation, exploratory testing, and documentation. Documentation. I'm going pretty fast actually. You're not asking very much questions. You want to go to the drinks? Have drinks afterwards? No? Oh, then we have much time. you will have a drink probably. Let's do a recap. I think a modern test process, 15 minutes, thank you. A modern test process can be characterized by 3 different things. It should be goal-oriented, with are we checking, are we risk-based testing, are we value-based testing. It should be flexible, so choose your way of testing depending on the situation. And it should be fast with automation and documentation. And I'm very curious. I did this presentation in different countries, and I would like to see what we should improve, what we should learn in Russia to become a more modern testing. And I want you to grab your mobile phone. Where's my mobile phone? Mobile phone. And go to www.menti.com and then give in this code. And then you will get these questions. Choose 3 different skills you want to improve. What do you want to improve? Your goal orientation testing skills, your checking skills, your risk-based testing skills, value-based, detailed scripting, global scripting, session-based bug hunts, test tours, freestyle exploratory testing, test automation, or creative documentation. So please go there. This is a very exciting moment in the presentation, because is it going to work or not? Yeah, it's working. This was the one thing I could not control. That makes me nervous. So I'll give you, let's say, a minute to decide which skill you would like to improve. You can choose 3 out of 9, I think, something like that. Let's have a short look. Okay. Value-based testing, test automation. Russia is not different from the rest of the world. You can quote me on this one. When it comes to modern testing. I've done this in Istanbul, in the Netherlands, in London. And test automation is always number 1. So try to make clear that test automation has its limitations, but still. Value-based testing is not always number 2. Mostly something like exploratory testing or session-based testing is number 3. Probably my what I said about documentation is not really. Checking is pretty low, which I think is normal. Who did a test course in this room? Please, everybody who did a test course, please stand up. during his or her life? Nobody? A course in testing. He did a test course. You're the only one? Okay. Oh, did you do an ISTQB test course?
No.
No. So 0% of those people who did a test course did an ISTQB test course. No, probably not working this way. I think we have a winner, test automation. I think you told me you were looking for a good subject for TestCon next year. Maybe test automation? Yeah? Did I tell you I have this great presentation? No, forget about it. Okay, I will put this in the presentation, and the presentation will be downloadable, so if you want to have this information later and you can still vote, then you can get it. So, to summarize things, what does it mean? Oh, we've had this one. A modern tester in 2018 we're living. I think he thinks very clearly, he takes time. What is the goal of my testing? What is the added value? And he or she talks to different stakeholders around the project, not only the project manager or the product owner, but people around that. When am I successful? What do you expect me to do? Do you want to involve users? Do you want me to involve users? Etc., etc. So you know very much about your goal. I think you can apply different ways of testing. The more straightforward checking, risk-based testing, more thinking about the business risks, etc. Or value-based testing, what's the goal of the project and do we reach this goal? He masters different ways of scripted testing. So making scripts, knowing your test design techniques is very important. Masters different ways of exploratory testing. And we had yesterday a class of 20 people, maybe more people should master that. You know to apply which way to test in which situation. And you talk with your colleagues. My project is this, and when they work in this way, test tours, bug hunts, session-based testing. I think that's a good idea. Masters different way of documentation. Try to work, let's say 2 weeks, without Word. It's possible, believe me, I've done it. And I use Word as little as possible. And don't make mails this big. Just walk to someone and tell him or her. Make some drawings in your PowerPoint and explain what you mean. Masters test automation. So you know what Selenium is, you know why record and playback doesn't work in most of the situations. You know how to get test data automated, etc., etc. And I think he or she has a community to discuss his or her situation. I'm totally aware that I'm human, I'm fallible, so I make mistakes. But I discuss pretty often with my colleagues my project. And not only colleagues who have more experience, also less experienced colleagues. Maybe they know something, maybe I can learn from them. So I think community is very important. I haven't got a real idea how community in Russia works, but in the Netherlands we have different community organizations where you can go, where you can present, where you can discuss your things. I think community is very important to bring our occupation, but also you as a person further. And never stop learning. Maybe I should have said here, never stop experimenting. Because experimentation is the basis of learning. Just try something new. If you're making a test plan right now, why not make 2 test plans? Make a PowerPoint. Suppose you're halfway the Word document, maybe you should finish it because it's your normal way of working, but make a PowerPoint of it and present it to other people. See how they react. And maybe, that's fun, that works. or maybe in this situation it didn't work. Never stop learning, never stop experimenting. For me, I'm in testing since 1993. Is there someone born after 1993 in this room? Yeah, there are people. I was already testing when you were not born yet. So that doesn't say I'm a better tester, by the way, but I experienced testing in that period of time after 5 or 6 years of testing, pretty boring, actually. I got this pile of documentation. I was working for the tax office in the Netherlands, where they did a lot of very old-fashioned scripted testing. And I got this pile of documentation, and I derived my test cases. I found out that the documentation was wrong, so my test cases was wrong, and that happened all the time by every project, and it was getting boring. So actually, I flew this way. I flew away from testing. I've been a requirements analyst, business analyst, more than 5-6 years. And then someone drew me back into testing. And it was a much bigger fishbowl. There was much more to do. Testing was so much more fun. Exploratory testing, not making big documents. Suppose that after this session you got the feeling maybe I'm in this small bowl. I would like to invite you over to this fishbowl. It's very nice there, and it's really nice, and I would love to have you there. That was my story. Yeah, I copy-pasted, and I'm not going to try to say it. I don't go there anymore. Are there any questions? I got 2 questions here. Usually we can select just 2 things from 3. Fast, cheap, quality. Can the modern test process all 3? No. No. Well, if you got unlimited amount of time, then with test automation and we can reach high quality, but it won't be cheap. Suppose you have a lot of time with a small team, it's cheaper and you reach quality. If you have zero amount of money or less amount of money and you're not you have not very much time, you won't reach quality. So this tension between quality, money and time is still around, and in my personal opinion it won't change. Of course, tools can help, or a different method of testing. Suppose your situation fits exploratory testing very well and you're doing scripting testing. Of course it will improve, but this tension, in my opinion, will always be there. So maybe not the answer you were waiting for to Anonymous, but yeah, that's still around. What you can recommend for Neko... Don't know that English word. Newcomers. Okay, yeah, thank you. Newcomers want to make a career in software testing. Just start doing. I love the story before on this stage by someone who just started in testing and was a bit afraid of test automation and just started doing it with a Selenium WebDriver. Not the easiest tool, by the way. Just start doing it, but of course you need a minimum level of knowledge to be successful. In my personal opinion, and I know some people don't agree with this, are test design techniques still very important. So know your test design techniques. Study different ways of testing. Experiment and maybe take the different characteristics and the level deeper after a year or so to see, hey, I have some blank spots over here. So just start and go, learn. And never stop coming to conferences. This was for free, by the way. But you're here to learn, of course. So never stop learning. How do you see content of a test plan in a modern test process? Well, when I'm writing a test plan, I try to forget what's normally in a test plan. I just start talking to people. I make a list of people I want to talk to, and these W questions: why, what, how, who, when. I start asking those questions, and I get information, and then somewhere in my head there's something, some idea building. We should test this way, and then I make the first version of my test plan, mostly in PowerPoint or in a mind map. And somewhere there, I take the checklist or an old test plan, and I see maybe I've missed something. Let's say test environment. I won't forget test environment. That's a bad example, but yeah, there's no procedure for filing bugs. Not the most tempting procedure, by the way, but yeah, but we should think about it. So I start to think with a blank sheet and just ask normal questions, and then come to a test plan and then check if all the things that should be in there are in there, and maybe some things should not be in there. So awesome, thank you. We started test with Kurt Cobain was still alive. Yeah, smells like team spirit. Everybody knows who Kurt Cobain was. He really died too young. Was a brilliant musician. Thank you very much. What could you suggest for testing embedded or IoT? I've tested IoT, and I can talk a day for this. How can I limit it to 1 minute? It was an organization who has things, the Internet of Things, floating in the water to measure water quality and the amount of water going through rivers. And the most important test was to make sure that this thing, this measurement thing, was working correctly. And from that we expanded it, and at the end of the test process, the development process, which took more than 2 years, we found out that we were actually unit testing, unit integration testing, system testing, system integration testing, acceptance testing. But we didn't plan that up front. But for me, IoT testing starts with the thing. If the thing is wrong, if the measurement thing, which is in the ground, in the water, in the air, whatever, if that's wrong, it will never become day. So we started with the smallest possible item. So maybe the old-fashioned way of working does work there. Embedded, yeah, I've done an embedded project, but it's very specific. So come to me afterwards. 3 questions on the first place where a test is as tester on a new project. Yeah, which 3 questions do you ask when you are on a new project? I think I've maybe answered this question about 2 minutes ago. Just the 7 W questions. Why, when, where, how. There's 7 questions, the 7 W questions. You can find it on the internet. That's 7 questions, sorry, but I always use this basic checklist. If I have to come to 3, why is the most important question. How and what, maybe. Yeah. How many slides is good for a test plan? Somewhere between 1 and 150. I got no idea, it depends on your project. I've been, oh well, 1 is not possible. I've been on projects where they said, well, we're making this app and we want you to test for a week. Well, then I would have 3 or 4 pages. This test plan for Dutch standardization organization was 20-something pages. And in my opinion, was a pretty big project. It was a 1.5 year. I would not count the number of slides. If I were you, I would ask yourself the question, what should be in the plan? Does everybody who is involved in this project agree that this should be in the plan, and make the plan, and you'll see how many pages it is. Make what's needed, I would suggest in this case. I think by now, it's 1 minute before closing time. I've never done it so right on time. Thank you very much. Have a good conference. I'll see you again.